Hello, everyone in podcast land. Welcome to the episode. This week, we talk about how we got so caught up with Google I/O last week that we missed the announcement of the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV.
We talk about Elon Musk potentially trying to walk away from his Twitter deal.
And we talk about Framework coming out with a new laptop. Last week was a big week for Google. They had a big I/O event. They had a lot of products announced. They have a lot of things teased for the future. So the podcast was, it was pretty much all Google. I think at the end we mentioned the iPod, RIP, but it was predominantly a Google I/O podcast. On the same day as Google I/O, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV was announced, which is one of their main phones, one of their flagship phones. It's a very unique phone, being it's one of the phones that you could look at and say, this is a phone for Android enthusiasts, for Android purists. When you look, maybe a decade ago, what would make an Android phone? This phone is one of the few phones that still has all those things.
Yeah.
It still has a headphone jack, a micro SD card slot, front-facing speakers, and a notification LED. Now, it was announced last week. It doesn't come out until September. So in typical Sony fashion, they announce a device and then they wait months and months down the line before they actually release it. Right now, all the tech reviewers have pre-production units. So all of the reviews they've had so far are kind of, these are our first impressions, and they make sure to let you know that, okay, this device isn't finished yet. The software isn't finished yet. There's still some tweaks that will be coming, but just a summary of some of the things. It's pretty much the same device, physically speaking, as the Mark III, which came out last year, except it has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which is the new chip from Snapdragon, 12 gigabytes of RAM. The battery is a little bit bigger. It's gone from 4,500 milliamp hours up to 5,000. Its display is the same 21:9 aspect ratio, which is a more cinematic ratio. It has a 4K display, 120 hertz. The display this year is 50% brighter than last year's. It has a 4-camera setup. And one thing that's interesting about one of these cameras that they've added on, it's what Sony is calling the first true cell phone with an optical zoom lens. And this lens apparently will optically zoom from 85 millimeters to 125 millimeters. And, they have some slided filaments in there which allow it to do this. It's a very cool piece of technology. And, it's how usable will this be? How beneficial will this be for, real world users? It remains to be seen. But the fact that they have an optical zoom lens, mechanical zoom in a camera, in a cell phone camera, it's pretty impressive. Now, this is an expensive phone. It's kind of the thing with these Xperia 1 Mark whatever phones. It's expensive. It is going to cost $1,600 USD when it comes out in September. So it has a lot of great features. It has a great screen, great cameras, the whole optical zoom lens that I mentioned. It has a headphone jack, SD card slot, front-facing speakers, LED, 21:9 aspect ratio. But it's an expensive phone. So it is hard to recommend this, to someone or suggest this to someone unless money isn't an option for them. Or I guess unless, let's say, you're a vlogger or a YouTuber that could use all the functions of this phone, to their utmost potential. But for just a regular person, $1,600 is way too much for a phone. But what are your thoughts on this device? I know in the past you've also liked the design, you like the features that they pack into this phone. What are your thoughts on the Mark IV?
Yeah, you said it right there with all the specs and everything that it has. Price aside, in my opinion, this is the perfect phone. Like if I was looking at this and cross-shopping this to a similarly priced iPhone Pro Max, I would go for this all day because it has the things that I want. It has the headphone jack. It has a micro SD card slot that's toolless. You don't need a a SIM ejector tool to get at the micro SD card slot. It's just a flap like it would be on any camera, which is great. It means you can swap out SD cards pretty quickly. It has, Sony's Vegas style camera where you can fully adapt all of the settings in a professional kind of setting to dial it into exactly the way that you want it. This is just a fantastic phone. And design wise, like I said in the past, the best design out there. The bezels aren't huge, but there's still room for dual speakers, like you said, a notification LED, and once again, a headphone jack. Like, this is so great to have things like headphone jacks and, standard ports like USB-C. So you can use tons of accessories like headphones or monitors to monitor audio if you're doing vlogging, or even with the USB-C port, they have accessories like an external display so that if you're vlogging, you can use the back cameras and it just connects to the USB-C port. And, that external display also has standard mounting hardware. So if you want to connect it to a hand grip or a gimbal or a tripod, that's 100% possible. So it's stuff like that that, yes, this phone is expensive, but honestly, it's not the only expensive phone out there. And when I compare it to other expensive phones, like, even ones that I really like the Surface Duo, this is great. 4K 120 hertz display, uh 12 gigabytes of RAM, Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 like you mentioned. There's no real downside to this device. Now that being said, like you
Except the
said,
price.
except the price, exactly. And that's the thing. But also cameras I think could be a little bit of a downside. One thing that I have seen from a lot of the pre-production kind of models that people have been using is they're talking about, hey, you know what, the cameras, they don't perform the way you would expect a cell phone camera to perform because things like Pixel and iPhone and Samsung do a lot of computational photography. So these are photos that are taken with less than stellar hardware, but are processed to look better after the fact. And it seems like Sony's methodology is they don't want any post processing, or they want very minimal post processing. They want you to be able to manage the way your pictures are taken from the camera itself by adjusting things like white balance and aperture, and whatever lens you decide to use. That's how they want the picture to be manipulated, not by some heavy software algorithms that are going to spruce up the contrast or colors after the fact. And I think for a lot of people who just want to take pictures with their cell phones, that might not necessarily be the best feature, because it makes things a lot more difficult. You have to know what you're doing with your cell phone camera as opposed to just pointing and shooting at something and getting the best possible picture that you would from like a Pixel or an iPhone. So I think there are some downsides to this phone, but overall, for me personally, if I was in the market for a phone at this price, this would be 100% at the top of my list. I think it's fantastic. And it makes me want Sony to do more with this type of design methodology. Like, I would love to see a high-end tablet from Sony with this similar design and these similar specs and ideas with, like, dual speakers and headphone jacks and stuff like that that we're starting to see Samsung get away from by removing headphone jacks. And obviously, Apple has done that a long time ago. I would love to see, maybe Sony do that and maybe even make it an accessory for their cameras. Maybe it's something like, hey, this is a tablet that you can use as a tablet, but also if you're taking pictures at a wedding or something like that, this can be your external monitor for your cameras and stuff like that. Um,
Mm.
but I don't think they'll ever do that. I don't think these products are all that popular, to your point. Um, and I don't necessarily think that this phone, as cool as it is going to change that. So it just makes me wonder, yeah, the stuff that they've been doing recently is incredibly expensive and incredibly cool. I don't necessarily think it's going to move the needle for Sony in any way. So it's like, how long do these products continue to last? How long do they continue to make them? I don't know, but yeah, it's just cool nonetheless. I think it's awesome that they're doing it. I just don't think they're going to be able to sustain these types of products for much longer.
Mhm. Speaking of, using the phone as an external monitor, you mentioned the external display for the phone. They actually have a sort of bundle that they'll sell with this phone, where it comes with a tripod with a remote grip on it and a screen that attaches to the back of the phone. So, as you said, let's say you want to use this for vlogging to shoot a video of yourself, but you want to use the better cameras, which are on the back. There's a magnetic screen that attaches to the back of this phone
Mhm.
so that you can have the better cameras as opposed to the selfie camera, but you can still see how you look on screen. You can still frame yourself properly. Another feature that they have with this phone is, I think, with the last model, maybe the ones before, you could attach this to, let's say a Sony Alpha camera or one of their Sony Alpha video cameras and use this as an external monitor on like a field monitor. Now they're giving you the opportunity or the ability to live stream from this phone using an external camera. Say you have a Sony Alpha camera, you can hook it up using a USB-C port, like you mentioned. And typically, when you're live streaming from a phone, you can only use the phone's hardware cameras. So, not the best experience, or maybe not the best footage for your viewers. But now you can hook this up to a Sony Alpha camera and use the actual, professional grade camera as your live stream video source, which is kind of a big deal. Like you can't do that with any other phone,
Yeah.
right? Usually, if you wanted to live stream and use a professional camera, like a Sony, like a Canon, you would need to have a laptop with you to do that. But the fact that you could do all this from your phone is kind of a big deal for people who want to do live streaming from their phone on the go. But, that's kind of a niche market that this applies to. It doesn't apply to the masses, like you said. They also have another feature, or I guess another app that this is supposed to launch with later on called Music Pro, which is, according to Sony's website, will allow you to achieve studio like quality from your phone. It's supposed to be this software suite that will you record on your phone's regular microphone. And then it will, in the cloud, it will separate, okay, what are the different vocal tracks? What are the different instrument tracks? It will remove background noises, any, wind, any hissing that might happen, which would be another very niche market that they're marketing towards. But if it's possible, I think that would be a huge game changer. But also, it's pre-production right now. It isn't. No one has been able to review it yet. So hopefully, by the time the phone launches in September, they're able to actually put that out. Maybe we're waiting for longer than September to see if this is something that they actually come with and if it actually works. But I mean, the thing about this phone is they're marketing to very niche communities. They're marketing, it seems like, to live streamers who want to live stream from their phone on the go.
Yeah.
They're marketing to on the go music producers, I guess, who would prefer to just use a phone and hopefully are, okay with the results they get from this Music Pro software. And they're marketing to Android, I guess, purists, right? Because in the past, or typically, if you wanted a phone with a micro SD card slot, it was okay. The Samsung Galaxy or the Samsung Note series, those are where you get your micro SD card slot. If you really want, the old fashioned Android experience, or not even old fashioned Android experience, if you want what Android was known for, then you got to go with one of those phones. But now the Note is done essentially, and the Samsung Galaxy series doesn't have SD card slots anymore.
Mhm.
And then when we're talking about headphone jacks, right? Samsung hasn't had it for a while, but hey, at least Google with their A series, their budget phones, they had a headphone jack, but now they've removed that in the 6A also. So there's a lot of things. And I mean, not to mention the LED light. I don't know when the last phone with a notification LED was, but when we were looking at things like the SD card slot, like the headphone jack, like an LED for notifications, if you're someone who wants one of those or any of those, then this phone is the phone for you. So it's okay. Live streamers, music producers, Android, quote unquote purists, is their niche market, and is $1,600 worth it? I mean, hey, if those are things that you need in a phone, I'm not seeing those anywhere else. So
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. But I guess the question is it worth it for enough people? I mean, they're on their fourth version of this phone, so maybe it seems like it is. Hopefully, I agree with you. Hopefully they keep this up. I wouldn't mind seeing more products in this line. A tablet would be pretty interesting to see from them. But I hope that they keep this up, and I hope they continue to make phones like this, and I hope they're successful. And then maybe people like Pixel, people like Samsung start saying, hey, maybe we should put headphone jacks and micro SD card slots back on phones.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely hope that that would be a trend, but the reality is I've seen a Pixel in the wild, I've seen Samsung phones in the wild, I've seen a ton of iPhones, never once seen a Sony phone in the past like decade. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I hope these kind of features catch on because they're the best. Uh, but at this price point and with Sony not really getting out there to the masses, it's kind of hard to believe that these are really selling all that well, considering I've never seen one. But who knows? Maybe it could just be a situation where they are reaching their niche and it is successful for them, and maybe that success will just hopefully grow over time.
Hopefully. Okay, on to our second topic of the day. We ask the question: is Elon trying to walk away from his Twitter deal? Now, last week, Elon had a tweet that went out and he said the Twitter deal is temporarily on hold because he wasn't sure if, the spam situation or the spam bot accounts were less than 5%. And, since then, he said that the deal cannot move forward unless Twitter proves bots are less than 5% of its users. And there seems to be a lot of hesitation on Elon's end, at least. And since this deal was first announced, or since it was official, Twitter shares have been sliding a lot in terms of their market value. Now, the gap between what he bought it at, which I believe was $54.20, it's now dropped about 40% from that price. In response to what Elon's been tweeting, what he's been saying in the public, Twitter's board says that they plan to close the transaction at the agreed price. And they are going to enforce the agreement because Elon did sign papers. He did agree to buy Twitter for this price. So it doesn't matter what the price is right now. It doesn't matter how much he says, oh, there's a lot of bots. There's a lot more bots than I thought there were. He signed the contract. He agreed on a price, and Twitter is going to enforce that price. My question to you is: have you been keeping up with the news around Elon and this Twitter deal, or did you kind of think that, okay, it's been agreed upon, he signed the contract, so we'll wait 6 months and then we'll see what happens after he purchases it? Did you think that Elon would try and back out of the deal?
100%. 100%. I thought that something like this would happen. And it comes from a couple of things. One, this whole kind of narrative around him trying to take over Twitter was done very, very publicly, which clearly, for that to happen, it's because he wanted the attention of what this deal would look like publicly to be for him. Like, if it was a situation where he just wanted Twitter, all of this could have been done behind the scenes. But that doesn't get you all the Twitter posts and the tweets and the comments and the, people are loving Musk because of, his savior of Twitter if it's all happening behind the scenes. And it's a similar thing to this discrepancy with the amount of bot users. Generally, if you have an issue with a company that you're purchasing, maybe fudging the numbers on, some things that they might have reported in an earnings call or otherwise, you're going to talk to them behind the scenes. You're not going to make it a public tweet. But I think this situation proves, and also the amount that he bought the shares for, right? It was 54.20, a 30% increase over what the shares were before that. But also the fact that, like you mentioned in previous podcasts, had to slip the 420 in there. It clearly was there to garner memeability and attention for Musk and his ownership over Twitter, or his relationship with Twitter, right? And so yeah, I always had in the back of my mind that there is a possibility that something would happen to derail this deal from his point. I didn't think there would be an opportunity for it to be derailed from shareholders' points, as we talked about in the past. I think that deal was too good to pass up, and also Elon is too powerful to kind of try to go to war with. So I always thought that, yeah, that would happen from a shareholder's point and a Twitter perspective. But from Elon's perspective, I could always seen that something be thrown in to make the situation a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more attention grabbing. Because quite frankly, ever since this happened, from even when he bought just under 10%, his name and Twitter were consistently in the news. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he gained more followers during that time, and more engagement with his tweets or with his uh, essentially his presence on the platform from that. And I think that was 100% as designed. Now, I think there are people who maybe don't follow Elon as closely as maybe they are with this Twitter deal, maybe investors and stuff like that who might be annoyed and surprised by this. And I have heard some criticism about uh, Musk's handling of uh, this entire event to be a little bit angering. I think a lot of people who are generally investors and are investors first and not necessarily fans of Elon are a little upset with the way he's been handling this situation so publicly and kind of not necessarily professionally or traditionally how these things are handled. But I don't think that matters because at the end of the day, no matter what happens, if he backs out of this deal or if he somehow short changes shareholders by uh, negotiating a lower price than he originally agreed upon, I think that's going to infuriate a lot of investors. But at the end of the day, I think he's still going to come out smelling like roses because he has controlled the narrative from day one. You know, it's been
Mhm.
about freedom of speech and freedom. It's been about Twitter not being a great platform uh, for creators. It's been about bots. It's always been about things that are easy to uh, kind of criticize the platform for, and not necessarily about whether or not it was worth that price to begin with, or you know what the company of Twitter is supposed to become when he takes over, right? So yeah, I definitely think this has been a really dramatic situation, very kind of unprofessional in terms of the investor community, uh, and I think that was 100% as expected, and it's going to continue that way until either he backs out of the deal or he gets a cheaper price. I think a lot of the speculation is there's no way this deal will close for 54.20, especially if
Mhm.
he can prove that there is a higher than 5% uh, bot ratio on the platform. I think that gives him the ability to pull out or renegotiate. And I don't think that that would be necessarily difficult to do if it is untrue. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to see how this unfolds. But I think at the end of the day, what it means is that Twitter and Elon Musk's names are going to be in the news consistently going forward, which I'm pretty sure is exactly what Musk wants.
Speaking on speculation, there are a few theories out there as to what Elon's really up to. Okay, so theory number one, he's laying the groundwork to back out of the deal since he clearly overpaid for it. Also, Tesla stock is down by a third over the past few weeks since the deal was official. Now, he has to sell a bunch of Tesla stock in order to close the deal, and he doesn't want the Twitter deal to take down his main business, being Tesla. So he seems to be trying to get more buyers, more, I guess, wealthy individuals involved in the deal. So he doesn't have to do the whole margin loan thing. Theory number two, CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which is an organization that, you know, reviews investments and whatnot, but from people with money outside of the United States. They would be looking so long and hard at Elon's Chinese and Middle Eastern money partners that the deal might not happen at all. Now, Elon's made it known that Saudi Arabia's Prince Al Walid bin Talal, Qatar's sovereign wealth fund, and Binance, which is the world's biggest cryptocurrency exchange founded by Chinese native Changpeng Zhao, are all part of a group of investors that are helping him fund the acquisition. So, not only selling Tesla shares, but he has to get money from external sources. And I guess he didn't want to call Jeff Bezos to ask him for help on this one too. So he's gone outside of the United States. But because he's done this, it's drawing more regulatory eyes onto the deal. And originally when we first heard this deal was done, It was supposed to be okay. It should clear by 6 months, and then Elon owns Twitter, and then we'll see what he does with it. But with all these, extra regulatory bodies investigating the deal, it probably won't close in 6 months. It might not even close a year from now. So it's kind of, in that time, a lot can change with Twitter stock, a lot can change with Tesla stock, a lot can change in the world too. So they're saying that because there's all these extra investigations that need to go on, maybe that's why Elon's trying to back out because he's like, hey, I didn't realize how long I'd be tied up in this thing. He probably thought, or not probably, maybe he thought it was just a quick, shaking of hands and deal was done. Theory number three, he's just trying to ward off any, let's say, extra bidders. He's trying to put some doubt on the fact that yes, he is interested in buying this, yes, he is going to pay that much, so he wants to prevent any competitive bids for Twitter, the company. Now I don't know how true that is. I mean, they've already signed papers, right? If the board of directors is talking about, hey, we are going to enforce this on Elon, I'm sure if a better bid came out, I'm sure Elon would say, hey, I'm going to enforce the deal, the price that I agreed to, that you agreed to. So I don't know how true that is. But, theory number four is like you said, maybe he is trying to lay the groundwork for lowering his bid to buy Twitter for less money because, as we've said, he overpaid for the stock when he first made the offer of 54.20. He was overpaying by 30%. Since he's bought it, the stock price has dropped 40%. So there's a lot of money left on the table. And especially if we think about him having to sell so much Tesla share, we think about him having to get all this money from foreign investors. If somehow he could lower the amount of either Tesla stock he needs to sell, or maybe lower the amount of money he needs to borrow from foreign investors, or lower the amount of external investors he needs, period, I'm sure that would definitely help his situation out too. And the fifth crazy extra big brain theory, Elon has known that Tesla stock has been overvalued for a while, right? We've talked in the past about it. It's a valuable company. Is it necessarily what the stock is valued at? No, it's because people love Elon. People love following him. So Elon wanted to cash out as much Tesla stock as he could without tanking the price. Because let's say if he goes and starts selling Tesla shares by the millions, people are going to be like, "Hey, what's going on?" Elon doesn't believe in this company, or maybe there's something happening that we don't know about, and the price would tank. So he cooked up this acquisition of Twitter as a smokescreen to unload a ton of Tesla shares. Because now when he sells his shares, it's not he's just trying to get out of the company. It's, well, he has to sell shares so he can afford to buy Twitter. He still believes in Tesla. He's still running Tesla. But to get this other company, he needs to sell his Tesla shares. And so he drummed up this plan to buy Twitter to have a reason to sell his shares. And now he's saying, "Oh, hey, well, Twitter has way more bots than I expected," or I wasn't expecting it to be like this. I was expecting something else from Twitter, so he can back out of the deal. But he's already sold his shares. He's already cashed out his billions, and like I said, Tesla stock has slid since the deal was official, but not as much as if he just started unloading shares. And so he cashed out. He has his billions, and he doesn't have to worry about buying Tesla, or he doesn't have to worry about buying Twitter. And there are even some Tesla shareholders, quite a few Tesla shareholders, that are saying, "Hey, Elon, if you back out of this Twitter deal, and you cashed out all of these billions of dollars from selling Tesla, if you don't end up buying Twitter, you have to reinvest into Tesla. So you have to take stake back in the company." But those are kind of the theories I've seen out in the wilds of the internet.
I
Do
mean,
you think any of those could be true? Do you think all of them are true? Do you think none of them are true?
for the most part, I think any one of them could be a reality. I think it's a lot of them are less likely, simply because, specifically when it comes to the Tesla stock, uh, you know, I don't want to say underperforming, but you know, decreasing in the past few months, that's been happening to the entire market. And it seems like Tesla stock has been lagging behind the entire market. So I would have imagined that Elon would have probably known this was going to happen eventually. Musk would have known, the market would have known, because it was just something that was happening all over. We saw it with on a very dramatic scale with Netflix of, hey, the stock price needed to correct for the fact that Netflix wasn't going to grow the way that investors were speculating that it was. And I think that's similar thing with Tesla, right? Tesla, the reason why its stock price was so high was based on the fact that Elon Musk is attached to that company and it's expected to have exponential growth. The same way Netflix was expected to have exponential growth. Now, whether or not that happens with Tesla still remains to be seen. That is still very much a possibility. But the entire market right now is correcting for the fact that potential uh, recession potential, obviously chip shortages and manufacturing issues. Like there's so many things that are contributing to an entire market slide, not just a Tesla slide. So I think that that one was 100% expected at some point.
Mm.
I think one of the most interesting things here, though, with this whole deal is that Musk's kind of gaming of this system is a little bit hypocritical considering that he's had a lot of issues with the fact that Tesla has been public and a publicly traded company, and there's been a lot of short positions on the company. And has always been very frustrated by that fact because of what it can potentially do to the stock and the price of each share. But quite frankly, he has fully manipulated and publicly talked about manipulating the price of Twitter in terms of not agreeing to the 5420 deal of potentially even selling near 10% of the shares because he would have to reevaluate his position in Twitter, right? So, and whether or not it's him reevaluating how much he was going to buy it for right now, which is also contributing to the slide of the stock, he has had detrimental effects to investors in Twitter. And uh, I think that can't be ignored considering that he's always had issues with outside investors having detrimental effects on the shares of Twitter. So, whether or not,
Tesla.
sorry, Tesla, yes, on Tesla. So, whether or not this has been something that he's planned for a while could potentially be true of getting a little bit more cash flow by offloading some Tesla stock. But honestly, I have no idea. It could also be a situation where maybe he just wanted to drum up all this noise around Twitter, then kind of publicly uh, really kind of defame Twitter in terms of, oh, it has all these bots and all these things are wrong with it, to then take that cash that he cashed out his Tesla stock with and at a much lower investment start a competitor that maybe doesn't have bots and is authenticated. Everyone there is authenticated and stuff like that. Who knows? But so at the end of the day, no one really knows what his motivations were from the beginning. But I think from what it's clear to see is that he is going to benefit from this either way, whether Twitter gets purchased at a lower price or whether or not the deal gets backed out of. The fact is, uh, Musk would have probably gained Twitter followers. People would have followed him more in terms of what was happening in this kind of circus situation. And him and his companies would have been in the news far more than it would have been if none of this ever happened, right? So I think he is very good at drumming up advertisement for himself and his companies. I think this is another one of those moves, whether it was intentional or not, that seems to work out for him. And despite the fact that I think a lot of investors are quite angry with his behavior, I don't think that matters. I think at the end of the day, he's going to come out looking really good either by knocking Twitter down a peg for its bot users, which everyone knows is an issue, not just on Twitter, on YouTube, on every platform. Bot users are a problem. I think even the Oscars came out and said that Zack Snyder winning the like Viewers Choice Award or whatever it was called was
Mhm.
heavily influenced by bot users as well. So bots are a problem all over the place. This is nothing new. But yeah, I think this is, whether it's calculated or not, I think it's a great advertisement opportunity for Musk and his companies.
Definitely. Okay, on to our last topic of the day, framework the company behind the Framework laptop, has come out with a new laptop. Now it's been just over a year from the first version of their super repairable, upgradable notebook. And now Framework is launching their second generation Framework laptop. Now, it's been quite some time since we've talked about them. I think, like, I don't know, probably about a year since we talked about them, right? And for anyone who doesn't know, it's imagine a MacBook Pro, but you can remove the keyboard, you can remove the trackpad, you can remove RAM you want, you can take out the hard drive in it, you can replace them, upgrade them, you can do whatever you want to the system. And it has these expansion ports on the side. So let's say, hey, I don't necessarily need a USB A port. I want an HDMI port. They have a system, you can pop that out and swap your ports. Let's say, hey, maybe I need an extra 1 terabyte of memory, but I don't want to carry around this USB thumb drive. You can pop in an expansion card that is a terabyte of storage onto your laptop. Just pop it in and out. So they came out last year. There's a lot of talk about them because laptops have, become less and less upgradable, less and less repairable. Just everything has been soldered down and it's been almost impossible to, let's say, repair your own devices. And they came out with a laptop where you could repair everything yourself, you could upgrade everything yourself. And it was kind of like a breath of fresh air, I guess, for the consumer electronics industry, especially around laptops, especially with all the talk about right to repair and how Apple apparently is going to let you fix your own products. But we've talked in the past about how true that statement is not.
Hmm.
But they've come out with a new laptop. And one of the questions that we had, and a lot of people had too when they launched, is yeah, this idea sounds great, this laptop sounds great, but it only really works if you continue to release new things for it. You continue to release upgrades for it, repairs for it. And they have done just that. Last year, or whenever they launched, they were on the 11th gen Intel processors. They've now come out with upgrades for the 12th gen Intel Core i5 or i7 chips. And kind of the way their laptops work is you replace the whole motherboard. The CPU is baked onto the motherboard, but I guess at the moment that's kind of how they have to do it for their laptop. But they've released a 12th gen update, and the new Alder Lake chips, which is the code name for the chips, are supposed to have big performance improvements and a boost in power efficiency also. Now, if you want to buy the base model of the new Framework laptop with a Core i5 1240p processor, it starts at $1,049 USD. Now, you can pre order them right now, but they don't begin shipping until July. What they're also doing is they're still selling their older version, so the first gen of the laptop, at a discounted price of $899, and they're doing that as long as supplies last. Now, let's say you don't want to buy a brand new laptop. Let's say you have the old Framework laptop and you want to just upgrade the processor and motherboard. You could do that. Along with this new motherboard upgrade, they've also released an upgrade for their top cover because some reviewers were saying, hey, this thing's a little bit flimsy. Yeah, it's great that it's repairable, but I don't want to accidentally bend this, let's say, in my bag. They've released an upgraded top cover, which is supposed to be more rigid than the first version. So you could buy either one of those individually, or you could buy them both as a bundle for $538. And you can buy all of these upgrades or repairs from the Framework marketplace. So it's nice to see that they've come out with a second generation. But I think the cooler thing is that they're following through on their promise to say, hey, a lot of laptops, if something breaks or something gets old, you have to buy a completely brand new laptop. You have to spend thousands of dollars again. But it's cool to see that they're saying, hey, no, if you just want the newest chip, we'll sell you just the chip. You can upgrade it yourself. You don't have to bring it to a Genius Bar or send it to a repair store. It's very easy to do yourself. And you could just upgrade the part that you think needs upgrade. So I think this is a great sign for the future of Framework laptops and also for the kind of the future of repairability, because the longer they continue to do this, the longer they're around, it's kind of proven the point that, hey, users want to be able to repair their stuff, their things themselves. Users want to be able to upgrade things themselves. And it's not impossible to make a device that can do that. But I'm sure you've seen a bit about this new next generation of the framework laptop. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, this is a situation where I am a little surprised. I remember when, we first started talking about framework and the idea of upgradable boards was a possibility. I was pretty skeptical at the idea that they would ever release an upgradable board for the framework laptop. And it's not because I didn't think that uh, it was impossible. It's because Framework is a small company. They're releasing their first product. I didn't know if they would be able to make parts that would fit that chassis as easily as maybe they thought it would be. But I was 100% wrong. Not only do they have a brand new laptop that's going to come out in the next few months with the 12th gen chips, but they're offering the motherboard separately for people who already have framework laptops. Like you mentioned, also the upgradable top lid to make it more rigid, and it's so amazing to see. Like, and just for a rundown, it's a lot cheaper than buying a whole new laptop, right? Like you can get the replacement board for, I believe, somewhere between 450 USD to just under $1,050 for the highest grade Core i7 version. So, and you can choose. You don't have to get a specific one. You can choose which one that you want to upgrade your laptop. And then also, to add to that, they have the ability to use your old motherboard in different chassis. They have a lot of things where you can 3D print your own chassis to make it like a desktop. Or I've seen some videos online where they've turned it into like a keyboard computer and stuff like that. Like there's so many things you can do with that old board. You can recycle it. You can use it in another application, and that's perfectly doable with Frameworks design. Like that's not something they're going to try to dissuade you from doing. It's your product. You can do whatever you want with it. And I think the most important thing is going through, like you mentioned, the marketplace, Frameworks marketplace, and their website of what exactly is available. A few weeks ago we talked about Apple's repair website, and even a few weeks before that we talked about the Mac Studio and Apple forcing people to not be able to upgrade their storage by software locks. And seeing Framework's website, I gotta say, Apple has to be ashamed. They have to be ashamed of everything they've been doing, especially when they talk about the narrative of sustainability and even using words like modularity in their last event. They should be so ashamed because Framework, a tiny little company, is putting them to shame. If you go through their website and you click on something like parts, every single part is available to order for you to repair your machine. And it's there at a completely normal, not ridiculous price. And not only that, they're offering upgrades to existing machines. They're offering customization. They finally brought in the fact that you can change the bezels around the screens and stuff like that. They have the tools. They have software. They have everything that you could possibly need to manage your own machine, repair your own machine, make your machine as sustainable as possible. And they are a fraction of the size of an Apple. And yeah, Apple makes so many more devices, but right now their repairability is down to three devices: iPhone 12, iPhone 13, 12, 13, and SE, the latest version of the SE. There's no laptops, there's no desktops, there's no older devices, there's nothing. And the prices, like we talked about, are ridiculous. There's no reason why a company like Framework should be outclassing Apple to this extent. And I am just so impressed by what they've been doing. I hope more people take notice of what they're doing, companies and just consumers in general, because this is something that I honestly thought I'd never see, and I'm really impressed by what they've been doing.
Yeah. I mean, the size of Apple, right? They're one of the biggest companies, one of the wealthiest companies in the world, right? They're what, past the $3 trillion mark. And I think, like you said, Framework is such a small company, right? They're just starting. And the fact that they are able to produce such a repairable modular product, it really goes to show you that Apple just doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
If they wanted to do it, they would have done it. Would have been done already. There's not, there's no logistics around it. There's not, the research and development. As we, as we said in one of our last podcasts, talking about the studio display, they created a way to make the power cord non-removable to the user unless you essentially broke your display, right? They put research and development into making that, whereas they could have directed that money to making their MacBooks more repairable, to making their Mac Studio actually modular. But instead, they're trying to make their engineering ways to make things harder for their users. But yeah, I think this is a great sign for Framework. I think this is a great sign for the right to repair movement in general. And I'm looking forward to more upgrades and more things coming out. I mean, their only product right now is a laptop. I think they've said before that this is just the first product that they're planning to offer. They're gonna offer more things eventually, but I would love to see a framework phone. I'd love to see what that looks like. I mean, we have the Fair phone, which is pretty modular, but let's say not the best specs. I would really like to see what a framework phone would look like. Hopefully they bring things like we talked about in the first story, right? Hopefully they bring the micro SD card slot, a headphone jack, maybe an LED notification light. But at the moment, laptop by Framework is a great device, a great product. And I like that they're sticking behind the whole we will release upgrades for this. You can upgrade, repair, you can do whatever you want to this device. You paid money for it. It is now your device. We don't have any say on how you upgrade or repair this thing or what you do with this in the future. So good job, Framework. Hopefully more companies follow in your footsteps.
Yeah, completely agree. Round of applause. I'm honestly surprised, to be honest.
I guess take it easy, everyone in podcast land.
I'll catch you in the next episode.